On today's episode of Football Ancestry, I'm going to be going over one of the greatest coaches to ever coach in the NFL. His reputation is massive. He has left a hefty impact on the league, and he's a full course of accomplishments, awards, and records. This coach has been called the Whisperer of Quarterbacks, the Guru of Offensive Play Calling, the Consumer of Cheeseburger.
I'm going to go get the biggest cheeseburger you've ever seen.
The Devourer of Barbecue, the Beholder of the Mustache, and the Fogger of Face Masks. Of course, I am talking about Andy Reid, a man of many titles, a coach that has left a sizable impact on the coaching landscape of the past and future. And today, we take a look at the coaching tree of Andy Reid. The Andy Reid coaching tree has 10 agreed-upon branches that stand strong and sturdy in comparison to any other coaches. There are many Hall of Fame coaches with decently large coaching trees, but what makes Reid's coaching tree so much stronger? What sets Andy Reid apart? It's his ability to teach, not just the players on his team, but the coaches on his staff. This is what I believe sets Reid apart from other coaches and helps push his name towards the inner circle of greatest coaches ever. A particular example of the emphasis Reid puts on teaching dates back to a Christmas many years ago in which Andy Reid supposedly gifted his coaching assistants a book. But this book wasn't about football. It had nothing to do with football in the traditional sense. Instead, it was a book about teaching philosophies called Mastery Teaching: Increasing Instructional Effectiveness in Elementary, Secondary Schools, Colleges, and Universities. This book brought a unique approach to teaching in the classroom, and Andy Reid took that knowledge and what he did was directly apply it to teaching the game of football. To this day, former assistants of his still hold on to this book. It goes to show the impact and importance he placed on teaching the game of football. The book wasn't just an instructional manual he gave to his assistants to read. It acted more as a symbol. It relayed to his coaching assistants what he saw in each and every one of them, that they are teachers first, coaches second. And this mindset has been ingrained in Andy Reid from his very beginnings. Rooting back through some of the NFL's greats, such as Paul Brown and Bill Walsh, Mike Holmgren would become Andy Reid's mentor. Holmgren gave Andy Reid his first NFL job in 1992, helping with the offensive line and tight ends before Reid moved on to helping with the quarterbacks. The two had previously briefly worked along with one another at BYU in 1982. Holmgren had admitted that when given the chance to be an NFL coach, the first person he would call to join his staff would be Andy Reid, and he did just that. Reid reminded him of himself, a student of the game who took notes and was always making lists of things he liked and things he didn't like and things that he could implement if he ever one day got the opportunity to become a head coach himself. Also, physically, weird how close Holmgren looks just like Andy Reid. They could be related. Anyways, those practices and habits would go on to help Reid form his own unique coaching philosophy that would mold both himself and the assistants on his staffs. Andy Reid has served as head coach of the Eagles from 1999 to 2012 and as coach of the Chiefs from 2013 to present day. He owns an impressive 215 wins, 129 losses, and 1 tie record, an NFL Coach of the Year award, and a Super Bowl winning title. This forms the very strong trunk of the coaching tree, if you will, and Reid's first branch broke off from that in the year 2006. Brad Childress is our first coach on the tree. He acted as assistant head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterbacks coach under Andy Reid before becoming head coach of the Vikings in 2006, where he coached a 39-35 record until 2009 when he was let go. His Vikings won the NFC North Division 2 years in a row for the first time since 1977. Those were in 2008 and 2009. In his best season, his team went 12-4. And reached the NFC Championship game, where he would eventually go on to lose the Saints in overtime. Also, fun fact, his running backs coach while in Minnesota was current Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. We'll talk more about him later on in the episode. The next of Reid's assistant coaches that went on to become a head coach was defensive backs coach and special teams coordinator John Harbaugh. Harbaugh is the most successful of Reid's branches to this point, accumulating a 124 wins and 77 losses record. Side note, that record is as of week 10 of the 2020 NFL season when I compiled these stats. Harbaugh has also won a Super Bowl in 2012 and has won NFL Coach of the Year honors. He's also only had one losing season as a head coach and has reached the playoffs 8 out of his 12 years. Pretty impressive stuff. Following that very impressive resume of John Harbaugh, we get Steve Spagnuolo, a secondary and linebackers coach under Andy Reid from 2001 to 2006, before he later landed a job as head coach of the Rams. Unfortunately for Spagnuolo, his head coaching career was a complete disaster. His first year, he went 1-15. He followed that up with a 7-9 season, but reverted back to 2-14. Oof. Fun fact, well, maybe not so fun if you're Spagnuolo, is that the Rams have existed as a franchise for 80 years. And for 3 of those years, which Spagnuolo was the head coach, he's responsible for 2 of their 3 worst seasons ever. While impressive, something you probably don't want to put on your resume. Unfortunately, our next coach doesn't get too much better. Getting his start as a defensive backs coach under Andy Reid is Leslie Frazier, who would be hired on to the previously mentioned Brad Childress's staff as defensive coordinator of the Vikings in 2007, following his time under Andy Reid. When Childress was fired 10 weeks into the 2010 season, Leslie Frazier would be promoted to Vikings head coach, where he held that position until 2013. Under his guidance, the Vikings would go 21, 32, and 1. Currently, Frazier works as defensive coordinator for Sean McDermott, somebody we'll also be talking about later in this episode. Next in our timeline of assistant coaches is Pat Shurmur, who coached the Browns from 2011 to 2012 and the Giants from 2018 to 2019. He got his start as quarterbacks coach, tight ends, and offensive line coach under Andy Reid. Not much to say about Shurmur, who had relatively unsuccessful head coaching careers, but one interesting tidbit, Shurmur posted the same coaching record on both the Browns and the Giants. He went 9-23 on both of those teams. I guess if you're looking for consistency and want 9-23 as your team record, he's your guy. Our next coach returns us back to the more successful branch of the former Andy Reid assistants, and that is the former head coach of the Panthers and current head coach of the Washington football team, Coach Ron Rivera. Rivera has a 78-70-1 career coaching record. He earned his coaching chops as Reid's linebackers coach on the Eagles from 99 to 2003, before starting his climb to head coach. Although Rivera has a fairly even career record, he's had some staggering peaks that really outweigh his valleys. His 2015 season as Panthers head coach saw his team finish with a 15-1 coaching record, reaching the Super Bowl, where he would eventually lose to the Broncos. He's also won Coach of the Year honors twice in 2013 and 2015. So altogether, so far a pretty successful resume from Rivera, and he's still continuing to coach, so there could be more improvement. Our next coach admittedly only coached under Reid for 1 season in 2012, where he served as his secondary coach and interim defensive coordinator for Reid's Eagles. And that coach was Todd Bowles. And although the link is kind of weak in my opinion, the general consensus that I found through my research is that he belongs in this Andy Reid coaching tree, so here he is. Bowles was hired to the Jets in 2015 as head coach, and he coached there until 2018, earning a 24-40 record. Bowles got off to a hot start, going 10-6 in his first year, and was the mastermind to the number 4 ranked NFL defense that year. Unfortunately, his teams kind of limped on and only won 14 games over his last 3 years. Now we reach the freshest branches of the Reid coaching tree, but perhaps some of the most promising. First up is Eagles head coach Doug Peterson, who broke off as Reid's offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach in Kansas City in 2016 to become the head coach of the Eagles, where he still currently coaches. His current record sits at 41, 31, and 1. Peterson has had a winning record 3 out of his first 4 complete seasons, including a magical 2017 season where his team won 13 games and eventually toppled the Patriots in the Super Bowl with Nick Foles as their starting quarterback. Our next young buck is Bills head coach Sean McDermott, who served as defensive coordinator, linebackers coach, scouting coordinator, and secondaries coach for Andy Reid. All of those skills has translated to a fantastic start to his coaching career, in which he has a career record 32-26. His record might not look all that impressive at the moment, but through his 3.5 years in Buffalo, he has built something that looks to be a serious contender in the AFC East for a long time. To give some perspective, the Bills hadn't made the playoffs in 17 years, but it only took McDermott his first year to return that team to the playoffs. McDermott is only just getting started in Buffalo, and I believe there are many great things coming for this branch of the tree. The last and newest branch of the Andy Reid coaching tree is Matt Nagy, his former offensive coordinator on the Chiefs, where Nagy had filled in following Doug Peterson's departure. Now currently serving as head coach of the Bears, Nagy's first season as the head of the ship saw a magical 12-4 season in which a creative offense was matched with an absolutely incredible defense and led many to believe the Bears were Super Bowl contenders that year. Unfortunately, that season didn't end in the bang that people were expecting, but rather a double doink. Nagy did earn NFL Coach of the Year honors in 2018 for that season. Despite all this early positivity in Nagy's career, he currently sits on fairly shaky ground as Bears head coach. And that rounds out the current branches of Andy Reid's coaching tree, one that saw several Super Bowls, championships, plenty of winning records, and a few Coach of the Year awards along the way. But Reid's tree isn't finished growing. Many of his branches are still currently coaching in the NFL, and he has assistants lined up for potential head coaching positions in the future, which is no surprise, given Reid's astonishing ability to grow his assistants. Let's take a look at some of those names. The most likely to become a head coach next is the replacement for Matt Nagy as Chiefs offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy. Bieniemy has already been interviewed for head coaching positions in past cycles and is considered to be a favorite to land a top gig somewhere else this coming offseason. Not as hot of a name, but one that has been thrown around coaching circles the last few years is Dave Toub, who could take a path similar to John Harbaugh, transitioning from special teams coordinator under Andy Reid to a head coach sometime in the future, as he has demonstrated good leadership and has coached very strong special teams units for years now. And that concludes the current coaching tree outlook of Andy Reid. Looking through it all, it's quite impressive, and it doesn't even include the extended branches of coaches hired from underneath Andy Reid's own branches. Not many, if any, can say their disciples were as successful as Reid's. Reid's coaching tree branches combined for a 413 wins, 415 losses, and 3 ties record. That looks even more impressive if you ignore the very unsuccessful runs of Spagnuolo and Shermer. You get a much nicer looking total win-loss record. But nonetheless, this is nothing to laugh at. Reid himself has had a sizzling career in his own right, with a meaty 200-plus career wins and a Super Bowl title to flavor that. Plus, you combine that with the perfect toppings of a dominant coaching tree riddled with Super Bowl winners and Coach of the Year awards, and you put that all together, and you get yourself a cheeseburger worthy of Andy Reid. All sources of this video come from NBC Sports, Sports Illustrated, and ProFootballReference.com. Thanks so much for watching. I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and shared this video with any other football fans you know that might enjoy our mixture of sports and history. And as always, please leave a comment to let me know if I've missed anything or got something wrong. I would love to know, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that the factual information I'm presenting is actually facts. So, with that being said, I appreciate your support, and thanks for watching.